All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Neal Dykman. He is the co-founder of Energy Transition Ventures, and he is here to talk with us today about one of his new ventures into drones, which I believe, Neal, you have a little bit of a personal connection to as well, so that's really cool. But thank you for joining us today. We do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Brian, Nicolette, this will be fun.
Yes.
So, Neal, why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, but your recent investment in a company called DroneBase and how that connects to you personally.
Sure. Well, I'm a venture capitalist by trade. I've founded a bunch of startups over the years as well, but I got a new fund up and running with an old partner and friend of mine, Craig Lawrence, who joined together with me to launch Energy Transition Ventures, invest in early stage startups that benefit from or drive the energy transition. And at heart, I'm really an energy guy, not a drone guy or any of the other sectors. That's what I do. But this one happens. A lot of the deals we look at, and this one, is no exception, happens to cut across the things that we like. From mobility, electrification, various new technologies that are coming out. And the technology platforms that are driving change in industries. And on a personal level, it tickled me quite a lot because my grandfather was actually one of the very first drone pilots of all time back in 1944 in a U.S. Navy program that got classified for decades after that. And I actually have a piece of some of the original drones there that were all of, they weren't 48 inches across, they were 48 feet across. So when Craig brought in this deal and said, we found a company that's doing drones to solve renewable problems, great, this is awesome, let's take a look.
All right, Neal, so can you tell us a little bit about your connection to drones? And we do believe that you have a relative who was one of the first drone pilots.
Absolutely. And as I said, that was kind of one of the things that made me interested just personally in the deal, though obviously not why we ended up investing. We invest in good companies and neat technology changing the world. But drones are quite fun. And I was, and I put a whole long detailed history of our original R&D program that invented them on our blog a while back. But my grandfather was one of the very first drone pilots and one of the guys in the R&D program in the U.S. Navy that invented most of the key technology in 1944 and World War II, and then got classified for literally decades. And after the Navy shut the program down. But they were flying drones that were 48 feet across, not 48 inches. And you got to understand that was miniaturized. And to make the technology work, they had come out with the very first miniaturized camera, from RCA. Sarnoff Labs developed the thing, and they were putting that in the nose cone of basically a plane, and then flying that from a mothership 10 miles behind in order to destroy Japanese installations in the South Pacific. This had been tried before. People have been running drones for years, line of sight, right? You could see it in the sky, you'd watch it move, and you could control it with a little radio controller. That had been done. Being able to actually do something significant with it had been challenging because, quite frankly, just trying to cobble together and make a big plane run remote is hard. And so what this program had done is they had invented, literally, it's like systems engineering. They had invented everything you needed. They had an ops operations team and a flight team. They had an R&D team on the technology, and they built a purpose-built drone called the TDR-1. And the TDR-1s were actually built partly by Wurlitzer and Schwinn, who was making the frames. Wurlitzer was making all of the mechanicals, the piano company. And then they had some sexy new altimeter technology that you could do remote control of the units over the radio, and then they developed this miniaturized RCA camera developed for the program, put it all together in what they thought was small, and again 48-foot wingspan, able to fly over the horizon missions. So it was quite neat technology, and all the other programs failed except for this one, and they managed to run the equivalent of field trials in the South Pacific with a 60% hit rate on anti-aircraft installations against Japanese ships in the Solomon Islands before the Navy decided, we're going to pull the plug because we have command of the skies, and it doesn't matter if we put pilots in harm's way.
That's pretty crazy because I mean I knew originally they started out as like radio controlled, but I didn't realize where that sort of transition happened from really being just sort of radio controlled to start partially being autonomous, right? Where they're I shouldn't say autonomous, but where they could actually go further distance outside of line of sight. Yeah.
Well, you've heard of the theory that it's called a drone because of the queen bee, and they were basically run it up in the air to shoot at, basically. Yeah, and then there was some early applications in the 20s where you'd fly it up in the air, kind of like you would a balloon, to do some reconnaissance, then bring it back down, and you could take a look at the pictures. Right, that was pretty simple, but it wasn't over the horizon, and you couldn't get very fancy because you couldn't see from the drone. There were no cameras, and in addition, the planes they were using were basically just a regular plane that they tried to cobble some controls onto so they could tell it what to do and move the levers. They weren't purpose built. And so they tended to do things like crash. And in fact, there's a very, very famous example where Joe Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's brother, was in the UK flying in Project Aphrodite, which was the U.S. Army's version of this program, where they were taking B-17 bombers and trying to turn them into flying bombs. Yeah, the problem with that is a B-17 does not like to be told what to do from the ground, and so they'd stick a safety pilot in it just in case it was going to crash somewhere, so they could take the controls. Well, plane crashed anyway and killed Joe Kennedy. Army shut the project down. To me, there was a couple of guys in the program that launched it, and I can send you some of the history that you can send and pass on to your readers. There were a couple of guys in the program that did stuff different. They looked at it as an integrated systems problem, which it really was, right? You had to do flight operations because flying a drone is not the same as flying a plane. You had to design an entire new plane. Then you had to design the controls, but apparently the key technology that made it possible was this RCA camera, which they miniaturized to 100 pounds in 1939, 1940. I think the first ones got delivered to the Navy in like 40 or 41. Yeah, and if you think about it, TV is not that old in 1939 and 40. It's only a few years old. This was one of the very first pieces of kit out there, but it enabled you to look through video, back into the controller. So, but that wasn't quite enough because an installation that you're trying to target was, say, 300 miles away, and you can't quite control it that far. There's no GPS, there's no satellite network, that sort of thing. Yeah, so they came up with the idea of flying a mothership. So my grandfather was actually a pilot that would fly the TBM Avengers, and they'd have 2-3 guys in the plane, the pilot, and then they'd have the radio operator, and then they'd have the controller. And so they'd fly the plane, the TBM Avenger, off the ground. A guy on the ground would fly the drone off the ground under radio control. Then they'd switch control to my granddad in the pilot seat, and he'd fly it the 300 miles to the target. And then when they got close to the target, you didn't want to get close. And if I understand correctly, they were flying when pilot was controlling both the drone and the plane, it was line of sight. He was able to watch it. Then when you got close, they would turn control back over to the controller in the back seat, who had a little green screen, and it was literally a 4-inch green screen, very grainy, and he had to put a hood over his head in order to keep the light out in order to see, and then he'd fly the last 5 or 10 miles, by video into the target.
Well, that's pretty crazy. So how were they transmitting the video back then? Were they using like the same technology that they were transmitting like TV signals? Okay.
Broadcast TV. It's broadcast TV, miniature radio. Then they had the radio controls to tell it what to do going the other way. And they had there's some new altimeter technology that they developed and some controller technology. Then they built the unit out of wood. Schwinn made the frame, the bicycle company. Wurlitzer was making the guts of it, which were all the little mechanicals. Think of it kind of like a piano, moving the control surfaces up and down. Yeah, so you could actually control it by sending a radio signal to tell it what to do. Yeah, and then using mechanicals to manage the unit.
It's pretty interesting when you think about some of the first drones being made by a bicycle company, a piano company, and a television company, right? Like, think about that for a second.
That was like the sexiest part of the whole story to me, was realizing what they did in order to pull all this together. It wasn't just, let's go fly a drone. And then they ran 3 years of integrated operations. So they were flying these things off of the ones they did in the Solomon Islands were off the ground, but they were flying them off aircraft carriers and landing them on aircraft carriers.
which is pretty crazy.
Think about that. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty neat.
All right. So Neal, we talk about, and I think you're giving us a lot of that historical background, and now we're fast forward, we're in 2021. I mean, what does that evolution mean to you about where we're going with drones?
So, I think there's a lot of technologies out there that are essentially swords to plowshares stories, and drones are no different. Obviously, there's not a direct linkage between that program and the companies today, right? There was a big hiatus of decades where nothing happened. But the technology got picked back up in we'll call it the 90s and started to get developed. But it wasn't until a few years ago that people started to make product out of it. My granddad would have loved the swords to plowshares, by the way. He was a mechanical engineer. His father was the dean of the UT engineering school that put it on the map in the 1930s. He geeked out on everything, right? He had one of the early microwaves. He had early electric, a lawn mower. He would have loved, had he been alive when drones got hot again, you can guarantee he'd have been out there with one flying it around and see what he could do with it, right? Programming the thing and all the rest. So he would have, and his colleagues would have loved these stories. So the first time I actually saw a drone was probably, I don't know, a dozen years or so ago. I was buying a house, and this is a rent house, and it's an old house, and Nicolette, it had roof problems, and you could tell. So you get the inspection done, etc., and it's 2-story, and the random little inspector guy shows up, does the inspection, walks over to his car, pops up the trunk and the hatchback, pulls out a drone, flies up in the air, takes a couple pictures, flies it down. Takes no time at all. Doesn't show up on my bill. It's not a thing. It's just how he got the pictures because he didn't want to go get on a ladder. Well, which is smart. I wouldn't want to go get on a ladder on that house either. Yeah. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then I bought a lot of property since. Never seen anybody else do that. I was always wondering why. What happened? How did this obviously very simple, easy thing not become a thing?
Right.
And I gotta be honest, I think that guy was kind of like my granddad. He's just an early adopter of everything, right? And he probably bought one of the very first drones he could get his hands on. It made his life easy, and he figured out how to do it. It probably didn't work very well. It was probably a pain in the neck, and who knows? But there's a reason he did it, and the next 15 inspectors I used didn't. So the world is changing, but it still changes in fits and starts, even now. And it obviously took, just like in the 40s, it took a combination of operations, technology, software, and hardware to make this stuff work. So we look forward and say, well, what's happening now? I mean, drones were hot 5 years ago, something on that time as a venture deal, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. That's when a lot of these startups, you go look at the origin stories, they got founded, and DroneBase was no exception. And they'd come up with this idea to have a drone network. So they're going to go, get all the drone pilots in the world on one software platform and make it easy for them to sell their services. And it worked, but it wasn't a huge business. About a year and a half ago, the CEO and the board figured out that, there are some inspection areas, kind of like that guy on my house, that really matter. And they're really valuable, and we can do them really cheap. And so they started getting into the inspection services business. One of the sectors they got into was renewables, which of course is my field. And you realize that, all right, it takes a few $100. We're talking like $300 to run a drone flight anywhere in the world, which they're able to do because they've got this 80,000 drone pilot network all over the place. And if you want a job run, they got a pilot that can go do it. Kind of like on the You Ship It platform, they'll go just run your drones for you. And if you're a big property owner, not like me with a few houses I buy here and there and want to look at every once in a while, but if you own buildings all over the country, if you own solar plants all over the country or wind turbines all over the world, what you need is to see whether they're doing well, failing. You need to be able to inspect the things. Right. Well, that means you need a few $100 drone flight run everywhere, ideally on the same platform, because when you get those pictures are not small. Pretty soon, your Google Drive is full, right? And you can't share them because they're all massive pictures. Or you can, especially if you want high resolution. And so it just kind of realized that you got to kind of put these technology stacks from the service to the software all together. And maybe that's what was missing. That the last 5 years, everything was just young, and the easy button hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah, and I think what especially you're talking about now inspection, right? So you already mentioned this. There's safety issues, right? Instead of sending a human up on a wind turbine, you could inspect it with a drone. But the reality is, back to what you're saying in terms of storage, you need high resolution video to see if there is something wrong, right?
Even if you're doing stills, you need high resolution.
Yeah.
Let alone, but you start getting video, that stuff gets big.
It gets really big, really quick for a few minutes of footage. You're talking gigs.
So
right.
then,
and one little site, one little drone flight, not a problem. That's you just put on a file share and you're good. You do it at scale, all of a sudden everything's gotta. And look, your audience, if I understand, most of your audience is pretty technical, right? Yeah, and they geek out on everything. That's why they watch podcasts like this, and they could probably go figure it all out themselves. But the rest of us aren't like that. The rest of us need that easy button. And I think the industry may just now be getting to the point where the easy button is getting there at scale.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about DroneBase and what the company is working on. I know renewables is a big part of what you guys are working on over there.
So I'll give you a couple of examples. We did our diligence like everything else. And one of the things we did in this case was talk to a bunch of customers. And one of the other things we did is run a couple of drone flights. Yeah, when I realized I could just go on their site and push a button and pictures are going to show up, I took one of my properties in Houston, which happens to be 10 antique little houses, from the 1920s that were one of the last African-American shotgun row left in Houston that we're restoring. And I needed images of it for these submissions we put into the National Park Service. So push a button and a couple $100 later and 3 days later, I get my stack of images. Never talked to the guy, never did anything, put in my credit card, didn't call the company, just went on the website. At the same time, one of our investors owns wind farms in Korea, and they had a turbine there. And we ran a pilot on one, and they had a turbine there that was their first pilot turbine from back in the day, right, when they first got into wind turbines. So you can imagine it's old. And everybody in that shop knew somebody probably ought to go look at that turbine, right? What are the odds that it doesn't have some stuff to go look at? But they hadn't bothered to do it because, as you said, it's a safety issues, a pain in the neck, all that. Well, this was a good excuse, to get started on a program. And so they got actually a new drone service guy in the area and used the DroneBase software, went and ran it, turned it into an inspection report and found a crack. A crack that is going to kill the turbine. It'll fail it within some amount of time. And they all knew there was probably something there. And but if you don't go run the program, you'll never find it. You'll never catch it. So a drone flight like that's like $300, maybe 400, maybe a couple hundred, depending on where, how much, the complexity, the kit you need. But it's not expensive until you scale it. The problem is what we really need in the world is not my one site run or that one turbine run. It's what you realize what their bigger customers have been doing, which is I'm going to run 1,000 flights on 3 continents this year. Please come take care of that for me. I need one guy to do it. I got solar and I got wind, or I got 1,000 buildings. I want to run them once a year, 4 times, whatever your protocol is for that particular asset. And then I need an inspection report set up with some software to go tell me, okay, I don't want to watch all that footage or look at all those pictures. Right. I need some software to tell me, oh, there's a problem on picture A321. Please go look at it. Get the human to check it. Tell me there's what to look at and escalate an alert system of sorts. So that kind of technology starts with the image capture, goes into the workflow, and then goes into how do you deliver the intelligence on top of the workflow. Right. And DroneBase is doing the service to get the image capture at scale, and chunks of the image management and the workflow, and then chunks of the intelligence. But it's not like other people aren't going to work on top of that platform to do more intelligence and more services and more chunks of it. Because I think at the end of the day, this is a very, very big opportunity with millions of people worldwide gonna use services like this and run services like this.
Now, sorry. I was gonna say, do you use? Is it all human viewing the images, going through the images? Is there some AI that's assisting with, okay, this may be a problem, this may not be a problem? How does that part work?
It depends on the application, and it depends on what technology is needed and what the customer needs. But there's absolutely software that is, at the very least, streamlining what to check. And as I said, the one example, some of these customers we talked to, they're running a lot of flights. They are not going to have a human sit there and look at the whole thing, right? You need something to down select it a little bit. Now it may be that it's worth enough that you put some eyes on a lot of stuff. But it also may be that the question you're asking is a simple degradation question, and you just need to take, or for example, if you're working on power lines, are there trees on that power line? Okay, computer can tell you, there's some color there I'm not supposed to have. Great. So then you kind of look at, well, what's coming next in drones? Well, you guys know all about a lot of the computer vision startups that have been going on, and a lot of the image capture stuff, but also the AI and the machine learning on top of it. So that plays into the drones. But when we looked at a lot of computer vision and machine learning type deals, very cool technology. Figure out what's there, figure out what it is, figure out if it's broken, map it against an as-built, whatever. Tons of different really cool things too. And what you find is most of them have a problem with the figuring out part and with the identification and the false positives and false negatives. And getting those down into an acceptable level. And so they need images to train on. If you don't have images, you can't get your machine learning tool to work right. We've seen technology companies whose sole goal is to reduce the number of images needed to train their machine learning algorithm. That's literally the heart and soul of the whole company. But it comes back to all starts with that image capture. So I think we're at the very early stages of seeing computer vision and machine learning work on this stuff. But it's not going to stop.
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh no, I thought you were going to ask a question.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. Well, we've talked about solar, we've talked about wind. You mentioned, even real estate. Are there any applications that you guys see that we don't think about too often that these drones are playing a crucial role in?
So the renewables asset inspection, I think, is one of the big cases that has begun to take off. The company does a lot of work in construction, and it does a lot of work in buildings as well, in just built environment for inspection. So, for example, the same little deal I had on my houses, real big customers do that on the top of high-rise rooftops that they need to go check out. Right. And that gets pretty expensive to go send a guy to every place. On the construction side, you want to take photos and video the thing as it's going through for a range of stuff. Safety, for example, all the way through to, are they doing the as-built drawings? Did they actually put the widget where the widget was supposed to go, or is the pipe 3 foot off? Type problem. So that becomes a really big deal. And I'll give you a non-drone example from an old company of mine a while ago. We had this issue of our plant was in the middle of Beaumont, Texas, and nobody wanted to go down to Beaumont if you were a customer to go watch your product being built. And we were building these really big 40 by 80 foot powerhouses. So one of the things the guys did for both quality control as well as customer service was they started sticking a webcam up in the rafters and pointing at your project, and then open that up into the project management portal so you could see what was happening. So we were even seeing stuff like that. Well, that's great if I can get a fixed camera to do. But if I need 360, if I need to go inside that building, if it's an outdoor building, it's a little bit harder. The company has an old friend of mine, had a little company doing video cameras for construction, mainly security stuff, but some kind of just check them on what's going. And he showed up on that company's customer list. And so I called him and I'm like, David, why are you on this customer list? I know what you do. You don't do drones. He says, but some of my customers want both, fixed and moving video. Right. So I just buy from them. They run the service. I run it through my platform and give the customer kind of the full suite. You never would have imagined it. But that's what they're doing for just basic CNI construction. He is feeding fixed and drone video into the same platform. Cool. The other big markets, there's a lot of companies messing around with various markets, but I think asset construction and asset inspection has become probably the biggest area. For renewables, it's O&M, right? It's O&M costs are most your variable costs because there's no fuel. Yeah, so you need to keep them down. And predictive and preventive maintenance is a big deal. And we think this is becoming kind of table stakes. Yeah, and it's just like you described. It's a safety and a just a logistics thing to go get up on a wind turbine or out on a big solar farm. And then once you've got those images, then you can use sophisticated tools on top of it, whether it's thermal or computer vision or what have you. And the better the tech gets, the more you can, and the sensors, just kind of like that old RCA camera, the better the sensor package gets, the more applications open up. One of the other areas in the oil and gas sector that gets hot and in the climate sector is methane capture. And or more accurately, just tracking them. Where's the methane emissions? Well, if I can get a sensor on a drone and I can fly a drone around or a plane around, now I can get data and feed it back into a system. But methane just goes from a broken pipe or a leaky valve up into the air. And if you don't have a way to track it and see it cheaply, you can't manage it.
Right. Are there any other sensors that you see being built in? I mean, you mentioned methane. I could imagine other types of sensors being built in to monitor other things also.
If it's a gas and you can make a lab on a chip for it, you can put it in drone.
Okay. So
think about it that way, right? And if it's a camera, I mean, look, you know all the different types of spectrum that are out there. You've seen technologies to do inspection monitoring of structural stuff that may be with ultrasonics and other things. I haven't seen that sort of thing put on a drone before, but could you? Probably. Yeah. But between video and thermal and some sort of gas sensing, there are a lot of applications potentially available.
Now I have a question. So say, for instance, you're inspecting like wind turbines, and now you don't have to send people up on wind turbines. If you do this, right, do you think, and maybe they do already, and I just don't know, are there like sort of like now because you're not sending people up there, there's some, there's more safety, right, in this because you're sending the drone. Are insurance companies almost giving like discounts to people who are using like drone inspection versus human inspection? Because it is interesting because now you don't have to worry about some of those like OSHA pieces in some ways, right? Because the drone is doing it versus the human.
I don't know if there's I don't know of any insurance company that has kind of directly started to tie that there. But no, you're absolutely right. Your OSHA recordables, you'll kill a company if you get too many of those. You'll get knocked off a plant. They won't let you back in. Yeah, right. So anything you can do to keep your safety record where it needs to be, especially for the big petrochem and the industrial plants and the big EPCs, absolutely, goes straight to your bottom line in both business you can win as well as the insurance cost. I don't think we're yet to the point where the insurance world is truly field data driven enough to be incorporating that, but it's absolutely coming. You're spot on, and there are a bunch of insurance companies that are customers of DroneBase, just like any of the other players.
Well, Neal, go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of finish your earlier thought on the buildings. If you got looking at that building to manage it from a is my roof failing? Same issue the insurance company has before they underwrite a policy. It's the same picture, same question, just different user.
Right. Well, Neal, we do appreciate your time today, and we'd love it if you could share with everybody where they can learn more about DroneBase.
Absolutely. Well, they can go to DroneBase.com, and if you go to the EnergyTransitionVentures.com blog, there's a nice detailed history of my grandfather's program, the Stag-1 Sat-4 program, and some pictures of the TDR-1s. If you guys would like, I will happily get you some video from some of the DroneBase flights on our turbine in Korea, as well as some of my granddad's flights and that program's flights from 1944.
That would be wonderful.
We'd love to share that with the audience.
That would be great. Thanks again, Neal.
Yeah, great. So this has been fun. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and we'll have to do this another time on another topic.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Come back and we'll talk more about energy.
Sounds good. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.